Our next awardee was raised in the small agricultural town of Watsonville, California. Yay, California, that's where I'm from, so. After completing his education at UC Berkeley, UC Davis, and Harvard, he began his career as a staff attorney for the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation and the Monterey County Superior Court. He served on the Watsonville City Council as mayor of Watsonville and was elected to the California State Assembly in 2010. Tonight's honoree is awarded the LULAC Legislative Award for his successful work to raise the minimum wage and grant undocumented Californians the opportunity to apply for a driver's license. So from the heart of the Central Valley of California, representing the 30th State Assembly District and chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus, please join me in welcoming LULAC Legislative Honoree, Assemblymember Luis Alejo.
All right, buenas noches, everybody. Where's all my LULAC people at? Hey, I knew I got to get your attention somehow, so I want to project my voice, and really, what an honor to be here today to receive this award by the oldest Latino civil rights organization in the country, and it's only fitting that I'm here with my good friend, Antonio Villaraigosa from California. Let's give him a round of applause. And also, Dr. Garcia, because many don't know, my family's roots, when they first came to the United States, was in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. My dad was born in West Laco. My mom was born in Del Rio. So we got Tex-Mex roots as well, even though we moved to California later on. But really, I want to really thank, because this award really represents the vision of engaging and invigorating and mobilizing Latinos all over the country. And as the chair of the powerful California Latino Legislative Caucus, I look forward to carrying LULAC's vision in California. But I also like reminding people that I've been a proud member of District 12 LULAC in the Central Coast of the state, and we're proud to host the California's LULAC statewide convention in Monterey later this year as well. But this is a historic year for many of us in California because Latinos became nearly 40% of the population, the largest ethnic group in the state. And this year, our country is also celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, the great milestone of the civil rights movement. It was originally intended to strike down discriminatory election systems and barriers for African-American voters throughout the South, but yet it was later used by voting rights gladiators like Joaquin Avila later throughout the Southwest to do the same thing. And in my hometown of Watsonville in the late 1980s, we led the challenge to abolish at-large discriminatory election systems all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court because it was shutting out Latino candidates from even running for local office. But I remember the words of this great, courageous Latina plaintiff, Dolores Cruz Gomez, who paid a heavy price for standing up for her community, but yet paved the way for many of us to be able to stand here today serving in the California legislature that allowed young Latinos to run for office as well. And it was only a little over 20 years ago in California where many of us were just young teenagers protesting Proposition 187, the most draconian anti-immigration law in the state's history. Luckily, it was struck down by the U.S. federal courts, but yet it did something very powerful. It opened the minds of young Latinos to get serious about their education, about organizing, about voting, and one day running for office. And guess what? 20 years later, those same young people are now leaders in the legislature, authoring some of the most pro-immigrant rights legislation in the country today. But just last June 2nd, in our state, my bill, AB 60, went into effect that will now allow over 2 million undocumented immigrants to legally obtain driver's license for the first time in 20 years in California. And in the first month alone, guess what? There was 240,000 visits to the DMV, and over 57,000 licenses have already been issued. A week later, I just got the earliest numbers last night. It's now 76,000 Californians have a license legally in our state. But for many of us, we know what that means. It means that now so many workers are going to be able to go to work without fear. They're going to be able to take their kids to school, go to church, go to the doctor's office without fear that someday they may get pulled over and have their cars impounded, or even worse, put in deportation proceedings. And even farm workers out in the beautiful Salinas Valley, where I live, they even shout to me, "Con Alejo, si manejo." So sometimes they even come up with a good slogan for you to run on in the future. But AB 60 does remind us, everybody, that when we recognize the value of hardworking immigrant communities and better integrate them into society, it's a big win for all people in our state. AB 60 is expected to be a $1 billion boom in our state, because just imagine millions of people now buying auto insurance, cars, and accessing lines of credit. It's going to be a win for everyone in our state. And last year, I'm also very proud to author the bill that raised California's minimum wage. It went into effect this past year, January of 2016. It'll go up to $10 now. It'll be the highest statewide minimum wage in the country at that time. But what basically that means is that our families will have a little bit more at the end of the year to pay the bills, to provide for their families, and put food on the table. And we all know that income inequality is one of the most pressing issues our Latino communities are facing all over the country. And while my work and dedication to civil rights was a guiding force, I also have to mention the support of my fellow Latino legislators in California. For over 40 years now, the Latino Legislative Caucus has been recognized for its leadership in advancing and uniting for the common good in our state. As a caucus, we stand on the shoulder of many great giants that have come before us, from Pete Chacon, who is the father of bilingual education, to Marco Antonio Firebaugh, a passionate advocate for Latino immigrants, and Jenny Oropesa, a visionary in Latina civil rights. But as the chairman of the California Latino Caucus, I recognize that we must advocate on behalf of more than 14 million Latinos in California, but also on the other many millions more hardworking Californians within our state. And this year, I will lead a Latino caucus that is comprised of 22 legislators, 17 state assembly members, 5 senators, 15 already chair powerful committees in our state. 4 of them are in top leadership positions. Our members represent all parts of California, from Richmond in the San Francisco Bay Area all the way down to the border region. And it is these influential leaders that are unified by unyielding desire to improve their communities and the state of California. And not to brag either, but last year the caucus made history when Senator Kevin De Leon of Los Angeles was elected president of the California State Senate, the first Latino to hold that in 135 years, everyone. But as a caucus, we all know that it's not enough just to be elected. It's not enough to have a fancy legislative title, and it's not enough just to be in Sacramento. We all know that the real question is, what are we going to do with these leadership positions? And we've been proud in California to be the only state that last year we provided $3 million for legal services for thousands of Central American children refugees that were escaping violence and that were escaping extreme poverty to find a better life in our country. And that was authored by Senator De Leon. Last year, our former Speaker of the Assembly, John Perez, led legislation to enact the middle-class scholarship that's also going to make college more affordable and lower college tuition for our families across our state. And then when everyone from Wall Street to Main Street thought that California would never reach a deal to fix its water infrastructure, it was Assembly members Anthony Rendon and Henry Perea who wrote the legislation and passed a $7.5 billion water bond that was approved by the voters just last November. And then there was Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez of San Diego, who made national headlines when her landmark legislation would require nearly every employer in California to provide at least 3 paid sick days for their workers. And now even President Obama is following her lead as well. But I want to be very clear that these policies are not just for Latinos. They're for all hardworking families across the Golden State. Latinos have learned to build coalitions in the most diverse state legislature in the country, and we build support and appeal among all voters in our state. We know that when you champion for the least among us, the poor and the disenfranchised, you end up lifting everyone up in our state. My own grandparents came to this country during the Bracero program as migrant farm workers, and they were one of the first families to join the United Farm Workers with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta when they came to the Salinas Valley and Watsonville in 1970. They themselves had very little formal education, but my grandfather used to tell us that education is important not only to improve our own lives, but that it was more important to improve the lives of others in our communities. And we never forgot those lessons. We know that there's still much more work to do in Sacramento, but there's still a lot of work to do here in our nation's capital as well. We know that we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform in order to improve the lives of millions of immigrants all over the state, including our nation's farm workers. In 2013, I led an effort in Sacramento where both Democrats and Republicans worked together in a unified message in support of immigration reform. By the end of the year, my Republican colleagues held the first ever in the state of California press conference in Sacramento, which we're the state with the largest undocumented population. It was only by Republicans, but it was held in support of immigration reform. That had never happened, but it shows you that miracles do happen when we can work together across party lines for the common good of our state. I really want to thank LULAC for all your tremendous advocacy, but we still have a lot of work to do, everyone, and we're going to do it together, juntos. Muchas gracias, la lucha sigue, y siempre diciendo que sí se puede. Muchas gracias a todos. Gracias, LULAC.